In Climate Watch, after 2 weeks of deliberations, the UN climate talks in Madrid ended yesterday with widespread disappointment. Delegates from nearly 200 nations were kept 40 hours past their planned deadline to negotiate with major polluters in an effort to implement the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. But many leaders, including the UN Secretary General, were unhappy with the results. The vice president for climate and economics at the World Resources Institute said, quote, negotiations fell far short of what was expected, adding the can-do spirit that birthed the Paris Agreement feels like a distant memory. Frank Jordans joins me now from Berlin. He's a climate reporter at the Associated Press. Frank, welcome. I think a lot of people are very dispirited by this news coming out of Madrid. Frank, remind us what the goal was of this round of climate talks.
Hello, Tanya. It's good to be with you. So the talks today, the talks last week in Madrid, Spain, were all about keeping the ball rolling on the fight against climate change. You'll remember that in 2015, a landmark agreement was reached in Paris. All countries came together and basically said, we're going to keep global warming at no more than 2 degrees, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 Fahrenheit, 2.7 Fahrenheit. And we're all going to go back to our own countries and figure out what we're going to do at a national level to make this happen. And since then, they've been meeting each year and reviewing what they've been doing and reporting back to each other. And the idea was that this year they would start to take stock of everything that's been achieved for the big 5-year review that's happening next year. And they would also make some progress on some of the more technical issues that are still outstanding from the Paris Accord, the so-called rule book that haven't been agreed yet. So we'll remember it's 4 years now and they still haven't completed the rule book. And they fell short on both fronts. So there were key issues in the rulebook that they wanted to hammer out. One of them was rules around carbon markets. That's trading in emissions vouchers. This is something that happens in some parts of the world already. And the idea is that there would be a market for this globally. And the other is loss and damage. This is an issue that is particularly dear to poor countries that are already suffering the effects of climate change and who say they need help. They need help from the rich countries.
So, Frank, these are the smaller countries who have sort of uniformly said, we're on board because we're on the front lines. We see it happening. But collectively, they make up, what, 10% of carbon emissions worldwide, if that? I mean, what did the major producers of carbon emissions, what did they agree to as a result of these talks?
Well, the talks are all about consensus. Either everything's agreed by everybody or nothing's agreed. And that's one of the issues with these UN talks. And one of the reasons why the final agreements are often so basic. If there's any country that isn't on board, and there were a lot of countries that had issues with the agreement, then there won't be an agreement. So the big countries, talking China, United States, the European Union countries, but also some emerging economies like Brazil, India, Australia too, they had issues with various parts of the texts. And so compromise had to be found that all of these countries would agree on. And of course, this is particularly difficult for the poor countries who, as you say, most of them emit very little. But scientists say they're already suffering the effects, and they're going to be hardest hit as climate change progresses.
Something about that equation seems off to me. Maybe there should be consideration for larger countries separately from those smaller countries that are, as we just said, at the forefront of climate change and who are not producing it. There might need to be some sort of compromise made there, because if we're going to find something that everybody agrees on, we might not move forward.
Yes, unfortunately, it's unlikely that any of the big countries would give up on their current right to veto everything attendees agreed at those meetings. There are efforts at a smaller regional level to move forward. So, for example, the European Union has set up its own carbon market. It's reaching out to various other countries to see if it can be linked with their efforts. There is now an international fund, or in fact various international funds, to help poor countries cope with climate change, build up their resilience to climate change, roll out renewable energies, all the kinds of things that they don't really have the money for.
So really quickly, Frank, because we're almost out of time. So what comes next? A lot was not agreed on. So what's the next step?
Well, next year is going to be the big meeting. The 5-year review that's going to happen in Glasgow, Scotland. It's going to be happening just after the US presidential elections. There might be a new administration coming in. There might not. If there isn't, then the US will have fully exited from the Paris Agreement. That will also provide some clarity, because the US won't be at the table on all discussions, although they will be going to some of the discussions. And next year's crunch time. Scientists say that emissions need to drop soon. They need to drop in the 20s by a significant amount every year if the Paris Accord goal is going to be met.
The clock is ticking. All right, Frank Jordans, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.